Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Our guest khatib today is our dear brother Hussam Ayloush, representing Care, California. We welcome him and Jazahullahu khair. Barakallahu fiik.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. وأشهد أن نبينا وحبيبنا محمدا عبد الله ورسوله صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم وصفيه من خلقه وخليله. نشهد بأنه قد بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح الأمة وجعلها على المحجة البيضاء ليلها كنهارها لا يزيغ عنها إلا هالك. أما بعد، فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله، وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم، وشر الأمور محدثاتها، وكل محدثة بدعة، وكل بدعة ضلالة، وكل ضلالة في النار. أما بعد، يقول الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه العزيز بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد, all praises and thanks are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our creator, our sustainer. We bear witness that there is no deity or divinity truly worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we bear witness that our beloved the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam is indeed the last of messengers and prophets chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. and sent to all of mankind, sent with the message of peace and justice, the message of compassion, the message of human brotherhood, the message of Tawheed, of monotheism. Indeed, that is the message of Islam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send His peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, and upon his family and companions, and upon his followers, and may Allah guide us and protect us and keep us among the ummah and the followers of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And may He rise us on the day of judgment, inshallah. May He take us and grant us the bounty and the blessing and the reward of being among the people of Jannah, of Firdaus al-A'la, with the company of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. My dear brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Always a privilege and an honor to come and meet with my dear brothers and sisters in San Diego, and especially at the Islamic Center of San Diego. That place, that community has special place in my heart. Allah knows, as much as I appreciate your activism over the years, your leadership, mashallah, your imam, and the support this community has provided for Muslim causes around the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless this community. The Muslim Ummah and American Muslims as well, like all the rest of the Ummah, have been in pain over the last 5 months in specific. Have been in agony as we watched what could be described the very element, the textbook case of a genocide unfold in front of our eyes. For almost 5 months now, we watched the apartheid regime of Israel target innocent Palestinians on a daily basis, wiping out complete neighborhoods in Gaza. And by the way, the rest of Palestine is not better off, but Gaza seems to be receiving the brunt of its new cycle of attacks. Almost every hospital destroyed, every school destroyed, literally every university destroyed. UN shelters, refugee centers, bakeries, businesses, neighborhoods, high towers, buildings with residential apartments. The intellectual class, engineers, doctors, pharmacists, teachers, one by one, targeted assassinations, not random. Israel claims to have the most sophisticated army. Israel says we have the most sophisticated and the best equipment thanks to our tax money to make sure that every target is an intended target. So when Israel kills 30,000 Palestinians, overwhelmingly innocent men, women, and children, including 14,000 babies and children, many of them could not even be recognized after their death because of the severity of how they were being killed. Rest assured, it is not random. It is part of a genocide that did not start on October 7th or 6th or 5th, a genocide that started 76 years ago with the intent of dispossession, occupation, ethnic cleansing, harassment, intimidation, terrorization, dehumanization of the Palestinian people. Because the Zionist project, in order for the Zionist project to succeed, it requires for the Palestinian people their history, their culture, their existence to disappear. It can't be both ways. You can't have, and of all people in America, we know that. You can't have an America the way it is without wiping out the history of America's Native American existence. That's how colonialism works. And the problem is the rest of the world is watching. And the shameful behavior of the so-called international community, so-called governments, so-called Muslim majority governments, has been shameful as we watch. Just yesterday, another massacre was committed, what's known as the Flower Massacre. Think about that. Massacres are now named after necessities. You know, there'll be the water, massacre, the school massacre, the hospital massacre. Now there's a new one, the flower massacre. Israel has been cutting off food, drinks, medicine, movement on the people of Gaza. For 17 years, by the way. That barbaric siege is not a new one. But specifically over the last 5 months, it made it even harder. To the point where now people are dying of starvation. The occupation is forcing starvation as part of the genocide to remove the Palestinians. And yet, when aid is allowed in, enough with few trucks of flowers, as we, bags of flour, as we watched yesterday, thousands of Palestinians, hungry Palestinians seeking food for their children, for their wives or their parents. As they got there, Israel started shooting at them. Over 120 innocent people were killed, most of them with bullets on their head. That's what witnesses and the videos have shown. 1,000 wounded, many of them severely injured. In front of the world. This is not the first genocide that we hear about or learn about in history or in our lifetime. But this is the first genocide that the victims of its execution are broadcasting it live to the rest of the world. The Palestinian people are saying, don't let our death go in vain. As they're saying, as we are being killed. There were other genocides in history. The Holocaust, Rwanda, Bosnia, many. There were many. But in all these other genocides that existed before, we learned about it later on. Sometimes years, sometimes months, sometimes days. Survivors tell us the stories. Maybe few pictures here and there that the aggressors took as they had fun doing what they're doing. This is different. This is happening in front of us, in front of our eyes as we speak. And you would think the world would react. The truth is, people have reacted. If you look around the world, mashallah, the response of people around the world, including in our country, is something that you can be, alhamdulillah, for the most part, proud of. Around the world, hundreds and hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people were on the street. And the numbers of people expressing support and sympathy with the Palestinian people is large, especially in brown and black countries. Let's face it, South America, in Africa, in Asia, Western Europe, and the Western world in general, there is a struggle because there is a history of racism that they're still living through. A racism that dehumanizes Muslims, Arabs, Palestinians, brown people, black people. After all, this is a history they're used to. Colonialism, settlement is not a new thing for Anglo-Western Europeans in specific. But with all the support on the ground coming from people, you would think policies would change. Let's face it, at least in America. They say around 70% of people in America support ceasefire. That number is close to 80% among Democrats. 78% of Democrats support a ceasefire. Maybe 55% among Republicans. And yet, in our entire Congress, 435 members of the House, 100 of the Senate, only 66, maybe now the number is 67 members who are supporting. So out of the total 535, that is not even, barely 12%. When people in America, and by the way, almost all of them, if I'm not mistaken, all of them are Democrats. So if 80% of Democrats support a ceasefire, why is it that only that many, 12% of members of Congress are supporting? The reality is, it doesn't matter how many, it is the quality of the people, not the quantity of the people. And this is really what I wanted to talk about today. When we talk about lessons from Gaza, because the goal is not to sit and dwell on what is happening. All of us are watching the death, the murder, the inhumanity by which the Israeli occupation is committing this genocide. the psychotic way by which the Israeli soldiers celebrate and rejoice about destroying buildings, playing with the toys of kids they just murdered, the way they news reports now and UN reports are confirming sexual assaults and rape of Palestinian women, sexual assault of men who are being held prisoners. This is all being documented. So it's not something we're talking about. This is well documented today by various human rights organizations. And for people to celebrate and to listen to Israeli officials rejoice and talk about, we want to flatten Gaza, we want to make Gaza a parking lot. There are no innocent lives in Gaza. Everyone is guilty, including children. These are some of the statements they said, and they continue to say. You know, one of the ministers just said yesterday, we want to wipe out Ramadan for Gaza. We want to eliminate Ramadan. Subhanallah. So when we hear all of this, you will think our politicians, including our shameful president, Genocide Joe, you will think they will change, will push for policies that will end the killing that is happening. And let it be clear, my dear brothers and sisters, America is not a silent witness or a cowardly international leader watching what is happening in Gaza. Our country is fully involved. This is as much of an American genocide, a Biden genocide, as much as it is an Israeli one. This is, after all, American weaponry being used to murder the Palestinians. After all, it is American taxpayers' money used to murder Palestinians. After all, it's the US veto that protects and shields Israel as it commits this genocide. Third veto in the last few months. It is American Western media that keeps dehumanizing Palestinians to make it okay and acceptable to murder the Palestinians. It is our president, the White House, his spokespeople, who continue to justify what Israel is doing, or deny it, or repeat some of its lies, even when Israel itself has denied those lies ever happened. So the truth is, it is an American genocide. And I'm speaking to an American public, American Muslims. We have an obligation, more so than any other Muslim in the world. Because after all, it's our money and our government that is allowing and supporting and funding and aiding and abetting this genocide. So we have a higher responsibility. Other Muslims around the world have a responsibility to make dua and try to send some aid if they can. And aid is not allowed to come in. And by the way, Israel is not the only country that surrounds Gaza. You and I know what I'm talking about. Aid is not even allowed to come from fellow Muslim countries. Of course, it is not the people, it's the government, the corrupt, shameful governments. But as Muslims, we have an additional responsibility. And a responsibility that only you and I can do. And that is to change our government's policies. So I wanted to talk in the last few minutes that I have about your and my obligations. What are the lessons we learned from the genocide in Gaza? When we watch, there are so many lessons. Wallahi, we can go on for 2 hours. Lessons about the izzah, the dignity, the honor that the people of Gaza bring to all of us. The meaning of izzah, the meaning to live with dignity. The reminder that sometimes there are certain things in life worthy risking all your life for. Your dignity, your land, your honor, your family's dignity. Yeah. Not everything is about materialism. Not everything you calculate about my job, my salary. Sometimes to speak up the truth and hold your ground, you're going to get some heat. It is worth it. The lesson of the importance of standing for something. The lesson of faith. Right? Having faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, when we watch these people in Gaza, they're not superhumans. They're not superhumans. They're human beings like you and me, but they're superheroes in the real sense of a superhero. They've conducted themselves in ways that we used to read about from the early times, and we think maybe there was some exaggeration when people wrote these books. When we watch the people of Gaza today, their subhanallah, perseverance, resilience, faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, love for the ummah, Their sacrifices are for the ummah, they're not for Gaza. They could easily give up and be like everybody else around them in that region. No honor, no future, no. But subhanAllah said, Al-Aqsa is worthwhile. Al-Aqsa yastahiq. The honor of the ummah is worthwhile. If the ummah is asleep, we will awaken the ummah. The other lesson that I learned, and that is the most important in my opinion, is the lesson of strength. What we live today in and what we've always lived through is a life where strength and might is right. It doesn't matter how much on the side of truth and justice you are. It doesn't matter. Look what is happening around the world. You can get away with murder, literally, if you're Israel. Why? Because you have might, power, military power, political power, PR power, you name it. Because there is a misconception among Muslims sometimes, I can tell you that. I sit with some Muslims, and when you ask them to activate, come to a protest, write a petition, call your member of Congress, their answer is, Ya akhi, don't worry, ya brother Hussam. Allah will take care of all things. Relax. Allah will take care of all things because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always on the side of the oppressed. No doubt. Allah is always on the side of the oppressed. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed rules in this world. And those rules start with, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah does not change the condition of any people until they change those conditions themselves or change themselves from within. إِن تَنصُرُوا اللَّهَ يَنصُرُكُمْ. If you give support to Allah's causes and Allah's values and what Allah asks you to do, Allah will give you victory and support. It's not going to come free. There's no freebie with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, we end up with an ummah that is lazy. An ummah that sits in coffee shops or on its couch and say, Inshallah, Allah will bring the change. Allah never intended that for the ummah. If you think being on the right is enough, being on the side of truth is enough, let's face it, there wouldn't have been a hijrah, a migration of our beloved Prophet ﷺ, who was forced out of his homeland, out of Mecca. Why? Forced to become a refugee in Medina, in Yathrib, with the Sahaba. Why? Because they didn't have the political strength to withstand the repression of Quraysh and its allies. And he only was able to come back to Mecca when he had enough built the strength, alayhi salatu wassalam. If you think being on the side of truth, is there anyone who's more on the side of truth than Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam? No, never will be. Never was, never will be. And yet, he was given a taste so we can learn of what happens when you don't have that power and you have to build that power. If you think being on the side of the truth, if you are oppressed by oppressors is enough, you and I, my khutbah would not have been in English today, by the way, because I would have been speaking in some Native American language, right? Because genocide of Native Americans shouldn't have happened. They're the oppressed. White Europeans came here, occupied America, and committed a genocide, but didn't have the power to defend themselves. If you think being oppressed and on the side of truth is enough, there wouldn't have been enslaving of millions and tens of millions of black people from Africa, taken to Europe, taken to America. There wouldn't have been slavery, because we all know it is unjust, it's the acts of oppressors, but it wasn't enough. It's only when you build power. And Islam is about building power. Our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us in a beautiful hadith when he said, in a hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, المؤمن القوي خير وأحب إلى الله من المؤمن الضعيف وفي كل خير. And then he continued and said, احرص على ما ينفعك ولا تعجز. The Prophet ﷺ said, the strong believer, think about that, the strong believer is better and more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the weak believer, although there is goodness in both, he said, alayhi salatu wasalam. And then he said, seek what will bring you benefit, you and your family and your ummah, and don't give up. Don't give up, because so much when we face big challenge, I gave up. It's difficult, too big. A Muslim, a mu'min, a believer is focused. They know what they want to do. And strength is important. Why is that strength important? Because that strength, the strength of Iman, the strength and confidence in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the strength, your economic strength, you build your businesses, your economy, financially. The strength of azima, when you have strong focus, strong morals, stand for what is right. The strength of politics, when you think you're going to stand for something, you're going to pay a price, you're going to be attacked, you're going to be defamed. I want to take a moment to commend my dear brother and mentor and teacher, Imam Taha, in this community, who made us all proud. One of the loudest, most vocal religious leaders, mashallah, speaking up against what Israel is doing. With no fear, using the same minbar, using every meeting publicly, despite the intimidation that comes against him and his family, and anyone who dares to speak up truth against what the apartheid regime is doing to Palestinian people. And he is and was being attacked, defamed, smeared, intimidated, or at least attempting to intimidate him. But mashallah, holding ground like a solid, like a mountain, because of faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and knowledge that he has a community behind him. He's not alone. When I speak up knowing that I have a community. When you speak up, you know you have a community. You know you have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and last. And wallahi, if you don't have anybody but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you still should speak up the truth. Because Allah places you in a position and Allah will ask you about that position. Don't be a silent, a mute shaitan who watches oppression and injustice and remains silent. Take your faith with strength. Ya Yahya, خذ الكتاب بقوة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered Yahya, the prophet, John, as referred to in English, John the Baptist. Allah said, I told him, oh Yahya, take the revelation, the Torah of Musa alayhi salam, take it with strength, make da'wah with strength. You know, this image of a Muslim we confuse being humble with being weak. No, be humble. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to be humble. But don't be weak. With your enemies, don't be weak. When they commit a genocide, don't be weak. Speak up. The ummah depends on you to speak up. We're not an orphaned ummah. We're 2 billion people with all the resources of knowledge, science, numbers, oil, gas, geography, strategic straits and seas, you name it. We're not a little minority sitting somewhere floating, hiding in a corner. The most diverse ummah, the richest history ummah, the ummah with a proud, honorable civilization, an ummah that uplifts itself and others around it, an ummah that cares for the weak, the needy, the sick, the oppressed, an ummah that will continue to do that because this is the message of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So stand up with your head up, and when your brothers and sisters in Gaza are facing what they're facing, don't get tired. I hear from some Muslims today said, wallahi, 4-5 months I'm tired. I can no longer participate in protest, in political activism, in calling our members of Congress. I'm tired. Really? Do you have the luxury to say I'm tired, and your brothers and sisters every single day get the missiles, watch their children being dismembered, watch their parents die in front of them because they can't get them a medicine, watch their mothers die because there's no food, hear about their sisters being raped, and they're not tired. They're not tired to stand up for their rights. They would love to see this over. They're not I'm telling you, they're not superhumans. Don't say, I know we keep saying, Gaza, mashallah, the people. Yes, mashallah. The most honorable in the ummah today. The dot, subhanallah, that brings us izzah. We watch them, we get increased in our iman and our izzah. But it doesn't mean they're going to be able to withstand that by themselves. No country, no people could have withstood what they've been withstanding for the last 5 months. If you would have asked me, I would have said a week or 2, and Gaza will give up. Subhanallah, they still say, we will not give up our land. But they depend because they know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on their side, and then the rest of the 2 billion ummah, and the 6 billion free people around the world. Not everybody is Zionist, not everybody is bought by AIPAC, not everybody's honor was sold for the highest bidder. But they expect you and me to stand up. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He ordered you and me and ordered the Muslims to have strength and build strength, He said, وَأَعِدُّوا لَهُمْ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ مِنْ قُوَّةٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and prepare for your enemies who are trying to wipe you out. Those enemies who are attacking you. He said, prepare against them whatever you can of strength. He didn't say you have to match their strength. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not order us to match all the millions and the billions they spend. In America, you have a role and you have a unique place that nobody else can do. And I want to conclude with stressing that point. 2 billion people around the world, 2 billion Muslims around the world cannot do much. They can't change US foreign policy. They have enough mess to deal with their own policies. Actually, the West, which is waging this war on the Palestinians and has been waging this war on the Palestinians, unfortunately, the West knows that the rulers of these Muslim majority countries will make sure to suppress these Muslims. Wallahi, there's nothing worse than being stabbed in your back. And I can feel how the Palestinian people feel today. Our brothers and sisters in Palestine can look and say, what have we done to you? We stood at the first line of defense in protecting your holy places, your holy land, your dignity, or what is left of the dignity of the Ummah. And that's what we get. We tell them we're with you. Wallahi, we're with you, and Allah is our witness. And we wish we can do more. But in America, we can do more. Because the only place in the world can end this war and end this genocide is from here. It is genocide being funded, organized from here. People, 100 million people in Egypt cannot change US foreign policy. 200 million people in Pakistan, 200 million in Indonesia, 100 million in Turkey cannot change US foreign policy. The only ones who can do that is you, and you have that strength already. Just activate it. If you want a proof of that, as people started getting upset at President Biden because of his role in this genocide, he sent his most important delegation, his top officials from his administration, not to Egypt, not to Saudi Arabia, not to UAE, not to Turkey, not to Indonesia, because he knows none of them can do anything. You know where he sent it to? Michigan, right? He sent it to Michigan 2 weeks ago. Why? Because there are 200,000 Muslims who live in the state. About 150,000 of them vote. Because he wanted to convince them to continue to vote for him. He wanted to convince them that he's not too deep into the blood of the Palestinians. And besides that point, the point is the 200,000 Muslims in Michigan were valued more of importance by the Biden administration than 2 billion Muslims outside. Think about that. Each one of us has that power. When our brothers and sisters, when innocent people are killed, your voice should be the loudest. In San Diego, you're not a small number. When elected officials refuse to support a ceasefire, when some elected officials attack your imam, this is an attack on you, not an attack on your imam. This is an attack on our honor. When elected officials say we don't care about innocent children being killed in Gaza, this is an attack on your children. The children of Gaza are our children. They are our children. And you and I have to organize. The strength of the American Muslim community happens when we organize. Protests are important. Dua are essential. But alone, none of them alone is going to make the change. I'll tell you that. Dua will continue before, during, and after. But what will change is when politicians look at the Muslim community and know this is a political muscle. Muslims vote as a bloc. I know you might say, well, in the presidential election, it's not going to make a difference. California is blue. And I'm not talking about presidential election. I'm talking about your city council, assembly, state assembly, state senate, board of supervisors. You can be the swing voters. You can be the one who can make somebody lose or win. When you organize, make sure you register to vote. If you miss the deadline for online, you can vote on the day off at the ballot, at the polling center. And do it. Talk to people. Learn about the candidates. Learn about them so they have to pay a price when they enable genocide. They have to know that Muslims are not on the margin. Wallahi, Allah is my witness. There are more people in America, and specifically more Muslims in America, who strongly support freedom in Palestine, then they are those who support genocide by numbers. But we're not organized. We're not organized. Until we organize and build that muscle, that's where might is right. Because now you're sitting on the right side, you're sitting on the side of justice, and you have the muscles to make it happen. Let's learn from those before us who made that change possible. And this is not a new thing. Other communities have learned how to do that. And when you do that, when you organize, join organizations. Look at your local care chapter in San Diego, mashallah, under a great leadership team. Be part of this effort. There's MAS, there's ICNA. Find the organization that are doing this work. And there's nothing that says I can only be a member of one. Be part of that effort, my dear brothers, and make that difference. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us, inshallah, among those who are part of the solution, not part of the problem. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His forgiveness, for His guidance. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروا فيا فوز المستغفرين. Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah amma ba'd. My dear brothers and sisters, inshallah, I hope to see you tonight. I'm going to be speaking later on tonight at 6 p.m. at the East Lake Islamic Center of East Lake, or Masjid East Lake Center, I think. Inshallah, we can have a more conversation of how we can build that power politically, so politicians can pay attention to us and hopefully be able to change policies in ways that will help all oppressed people, including our brothers and sisters in Palestine. عباد الله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد كما صليت وسلمت وباركت على سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم يا أرحم الراحمين ويا ناصر المظلومين ارحم إخواننا في غزة وانصرهم على أعدائك وأعدائهم. اللهم فرج همهم ونفس كربهم وداوي مرضاهم وجرحاهم وتقبل شهداءهم. اللهم وثبت أقدامهم ووحد صفوفهم وانصرهم على من عاداك وعاداهم. اللهم انصر من نصر إخواننا في غزة وفي سائر بلاد المسلمين واخذل من خذل إخواننا في غزة وأهلنا في غزة وفي سائر بلاد المسلمين. اللهم إنا نستودعك أهلنا وأحبابنا وإخواننا وأخواتنا وأبنائنا وبناتنا في غزة. اللهم كن لهم ناصر، كن لهم ناصرا ونصيرا ومعينا. اللهم لا مولى لنا إلا أنت ولا ناصر لنا إلا أنت. اللهم إن لم يكن بك غضب علينا فلا نبالي. اللهم إن لم يكن بك غضب علينا فلا نبالي. اللهم إن لم يكن بك غضب علينا فلا نبالي. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
استووا واعتدلوا أثابنا وأثابكم الله. الله أكبر. سبحانك تبارك اسمك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. وقضينا إلى بني إسرائيل في الكتاب لتفسدن في الأرض مرتين ولتعلن علوا كبيرا
فإذا جاء وعد أولاهما بعثنا عليكم عبادا لنا أولي بأس شديد فجاسوا خلال الديار وكان وعدا مفعولا ثم رددنا لكم الكرة عليهم وأمددناكم بأموال وبنين وجعلناكم أكثر نفيرا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. ثم رددنا لكم الكرة عليهم وأمددناكم بأموال وبنين وجعلناكم أكثر نفيرا. إن أحسنتم أحسنتم لأنفسكم وإن أسأتم فلها فإذا جاء وعد الآخرة ليسوءوا وجوهكم وليدخلوا المسجد كما دخلوه أول مرة وليتبروا ما علوا تتبيرا. عسى ربكم أن يرحمكم وإن عدتم عدنا وجعلنا جهنم للكافرين حصيرا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. حمدا طيبا. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. استغفر الله.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.